Good morning. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's a little rainy today, so the lighting may not be the best, but I always have lighting issues anyway, so hopefully it's not too big a deal. And you? Good, 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 good. Good to hear. So today I thought we could talk about property, and it's not a subject that I'm particularly versed at. I'm not an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination, but the issue of property rights is important in this case, and property law will factor very heavily in this case because fundamentally the question is whether every human being or only some human beings have a property right and property interest in their own bodies, right? So I always talk about the possessive pronoun, my body. That means that there's something that owns my body, and that's me, right? So I am not my body. My body belongs to me. Does that belonging make my body my property? It's my view that it does. My body is my property. It's the one piece of property that I have from the beginning of my life to the end of my life. And that's true for every human being. The problem is that I don't think, I could be wrong, that in the law it has been clearly established that every human being has a property right and property interest in their own body. John Locke, who was a 17th century English philosopher, agrees with my view that every human being has a property interest and a property right to their own bodies. And it's for me it's very clear. We are first in time and first in right to our bodies at birth, right? There's somebody in there, there's something or somebody in there. The body belongs to that thing, hence the possessive pronoun, as I said. Even though our bodies belong to us, however, the government can and does regulate how we handle our bodies. So the property right or property interest in our bodies is not absolute. You can't do whatever you want with your body because the government has said that you can't, okay? You can't, for example, sell your body parts as of today, such as, your kidneys or your heart or, while you're alive. And even when you're dead, I don't think that, well, I'm not sure what happens when you die. I think when you die, third parties can, use your body for research and different things like that. I don't know whether that is, sold, whether it's sold or not, I'm not sure. But while you're alive, the government definitely can regulate how you handle your body, that you can't sell your body parts, you can't, what else can't you do? I mean, a woman's body, obviously, we know that the government has, um, been very involved in monitoring what a woman can do with her body, whether she can, end a pregnancy or not, if she's not, for any reason, ready to, have a child. She can be stopped from ending that pregnancy, which is something inside her body, by the government. The government can also tell you that you have to cover your body. For example, you can't just walk out on the streets naked, even though it's your body and you don't care if everybody sees it. You can't do that. So the property right in our bodies is definitely not absolute, okay? But clearly, like any other property, any other possession, if it's yours, you do have an exclusive right to determine how it's going to be used under normal circumstances, I think. And with the case of these millions of workers that I talk about in my book, they were not slaves. They had no rights at all to the use and enjoyment of their bodies. They were, quote unquote, owned, quote unquote, because that's a very problematic term for me personally, by third parties. And those third parties were allowed with the authority and of the government, the statutory and apparent authority of the government, to claim ownership over somebody else's body. And that somebody else equaled nearly 17 million individual bodies were owned at some point in time between 1619 and 1865, when these people were finally freed. So the question is whether the government has the authority to do that, whether the government can give itself the authority to divest someone completely of their property and their possession without any compensation whatsoever. I mean, the government can divest a person of other types of property, real property like land, real estate, under eminent domain laws, etc. But the Constitution, I think, is clear that it has to be with just compensation, or at least some compensation. In the case of these millions of workers, of civilians who were attacked in their habitations in Africa and brought to the Americas between 1619 and 1865, their right to their bodies were completely taken away, 100%. And as a result, as I said, there has been this economic blitzkrieg in the community of people who, oh my goodness, sorry, this keeps falling, sorry. I have no idea where I was, but let me just pick up wherever. So in terms of property rights, for me, the question becomes whether the government has the whether the government has the authority, just because it gives itself that authority, to permit third parties to exercise dominion and control over other people's property, which is their body, without that person's consent, and to deprive certain individuals in society of 100% of their ownership rights to their bodies, which is their possession, without any compensation and without their consent. I think that's the question. And if the government can't do that, and the government has done that in the past, whether a court proceeding can be started to seek compensation for the unjust deprivation of property of these millions of people. Property law, as I said, is very complex. I mean, even though we are not our bodies and our bodies belong to us and it's our possession, our property, as I said, the government can regulate how and to what extent and how much dominion and control we have over our bodies and how we use our bodies. But I don't believe that the government can divest a person 100% of their bodies, of any property or possession, whether it's real property, intellectual property, personal property, public property, collective property. I don't think that in any legal regime that something like that can be justified, especially when it's being done only to one group who happens to share a particular characteristic, whether it is their nationality, their race, their gender, any other such irrational criteria. And the other question that would stem from that, in my view, is whether, if the government wrongfully deprived these millions of civilians of their property rights to their own bodies and to their own property itself, their own possession to their bodies and to themselves, whether um, damages can be sought on behalf of these people, and what then would you do with those funds? I mean, in my view, those funds should be put into an administrative trust. There should be a trustee, and those funds should be inherited by the direct descendants of these workers. It would be somewhat complex, this process of determining who the direct descendants are, who would be in my view, the heirs of these individuals. But it would be a very, very important undertaking, not just symbolically, but from a legal perspective. It is the only lawful outcome in a situation like this, I think, is to restitute and to use the inheritance laws and any other laws necessary to convey and to disperse those funds to the rightful parties. So again, property law, is not my forte necessarily. I mean, I did go to law school 100 years ago, I like to say, and none of this is particularly intuitive for me. Well, no, it's intuitive for me. I mean, it's my intuition, really, but it's not necessarily how every lawyer would see the case, or judges for that matter. But for me, this is a case that's very heavily, it very heavily implicates property law and inheritance law and other things, constitutional law, civil rights law, international law, contract law. I mean, it's the whole gamut. But the property law aspect is important in terms of the conversion of the bodies of these individuals, millions of them, 17 million approximately, which would mean that almost, equivalent to the entire populations of Sweden, Armenia, Jamaica, and Montenegro combined. Okay, it's a lot of people, and so just 80 years, declaring with their cohorts that they are into human rights, and they won't do that anymore.